Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Good afternoon and welcome to your Sioux Falls City Council informational meeting. Today is Monday, February 4th, a creature of habit here. We moved our meeting one day due to the Municipal League Day in Pierre tomorrow. So we'll call this meeting to order. First item is City Council open discussion. Any items up for City Council open discussion? Councilor Staley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 3 items, so I could do one and let someone else speak if they want to. The first thing I wanted to say is that I just spent 11 hours out at the Benson Flea Market in my annual trip out there, and Councilor Brecky came out and joined me, and it was just a wonderful chance to meet with our people and listen to them, and I'll tell you, they were so grateful to have a chance to be heard. I consider the Benson Flea Market like the heartbeat of America, heartbeat of Sioux Falls, just good people out there. So did that, and it was a wonderful experience. I have 2 other things, but if somebody else wants to talk, I'll stop.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Okay, so item number 2, I just wanted to say publicly, for the record, that I have the utmost respect and appreciation to all the citizens who put their name in the hat to be on the Event Center Campus Task Force Group. I have the utmost respect and appreciation for those individuals from our community who were chosen to be on that task force. However, I have publicly said this on Facebook, and I will continue to express my concern that this thing is going to be moving forward in secrecy. I think it's the people's money, it's the people's business. I appreciate that the Argus Leader pointed out in their editorial yesterday in Sunday's paper that in the past, our previous mayor did allow the public to view and to have input into task force such as the Urban Ag Task Force, the Annexation Task Force. There was a task force on transit, billboard task force. So we got input from the people on the front end of a discussion. I have yet to receive any information from the administration about how this thing's going to proceed onward. And the only piece of information that I received about the secrecy part of it was from the Argus Leader report that was in the paper a week ago. So I know people have great hope about transparency, representation, openness, and I'm just hoping that we take a different turn with this thing so that we have all the people informed about what's happening with this taxpayer-funded entity called the Event Center Campus. So I wanted to say that. And then the third thing I'm going to say is that I just had a beekeeping meeting brought together. We had 2 gentlemen there who actually teach beekeeping classes for the Sioux Empire. And I didn't realize until recently, again from the Argus Leader reporting, thank you Argus, that it's illegal to keep bees in our community. And I found it somewhat ironic that we're teaching beekeeping classes at the Mary Jo Arboretum, and I guess at the Butterfly Campus, but we don't allow it in our community. So just to start off with a little conversation, as I know Councilor Erickson did with Councilor Neitzer when it came to the drone issue and fire pits, we just had a little conversation about where we're at, where we've been, where we might want to go, and it was a wonderful dialogue. So involving the public in communication and finding ways to connect to our citizens is really, to me, a top priority. So that's my 3 cents.
Does anybody else have any open discussion? Go ahead, Councilor Starr.
Yes, I guess I wanted to echo that a little bit about the openness and transparency of the process with the Event Center Task Force meeting. I know the mayor has the right to put a group of advisors together that are under his purview, but at the same time, this had, I would call it, record number of people who were interested in being involved in the process. We bragged there were over 100 people who submitted applications to be part of that task force, and I would make the assumption that a good part of those people would want to attend those meetings, even if they're not on the task force, and to actually have a public way of offering their input and their opinions. To say afterwards that this isn't going to be a report that's just this committee is going to just put a report together and it's going to go, the binder is going to go on the shelf, that it's the intent to move it forward and to be an active part. This council has been very active in this issue. We fought hard to be included in the consultants report that we just completed of what to do with the area. In fact, we found the money when it was hidden in the budget that they were going to, the former administration was going to put this task force consultant together, and we added that we wanted the whole complex to be studied and reviewed. And to not have anyone from the council to be part of this, that's what the 8 of us were elected to do, was to provide policy for the city. The legislative branch in the mayor's office is to put that policy into play, and to have a policy put on our desks and say this is where we're going and this is the best recommendation for our community without us having the input at the beginning, and to already have the decisions made really hamstrings us, and it's kind of insulting that we're not part of that process. We've fought hard to be part of the decision-making process of that complex. It's the future of our city. It's what we do. We get tied down in the minutia so often in this group of day-to-day and $1,000 here and $1,000 there. I know when I ran, one of the things I said, it's our vision that this council brings to our city. That's our role. We're supposed to be the dreamers. We're supposed to set that going forward with the input and the help of our community. If I leave on my term of this council and all I did was decide a few dollars in a contract here or there, and we don't set long-range policy that makes our community successful 20 and 50 years from now, then I think I failed as a counselor. And to sit back and not say anything and say this is the way it should be, I think is not the appropriate role for this council.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
Any other open discussion? Go ahead, Councilor Staley.
Excuse me, my last 4 cents here. Just to clarify, we do have a council member on the committee. Kurt Sale was appointed to the committee. So there is going to be someone, but apparently, I mean, we don't get to be there and to hear what the dialogue is. And again, as Councilor Starr said, a lot of people wanted to do this. And I would think if we would have said to them, you're going to be doing it in the public's eye, we'd still have a lot of people wanting to be involved with this. When it came out last year, the Argus said, what should we do with the arena? I mean, I'm telling you what, Facebook exploded. People had strong opinions on either side of that. And I think that's good for our community to have this dialogue, and it's a little messy, but that's how democracy works. Also, I just wanted to say a word about our Councilor Pat Starr. Of bereavement. He lost his father, Jim, last week to cancer. And I was, Councilor Brecky and I were able to make a trip there to the visitation, and I know it was hard. I lost my mother last November, and once again, I did my yearly little segment on Inside Town Hall, and you know, I started out with the word love. And I said, it's the month of February, we need to love one another. In this group of political collaboration here, we need to love, we need to have forgiveness. There's all sorts of things that happen in the political world. And I said a word, just a little preaching word here, is that we need to be working to stop this political divide of partisanship. Republican, Democrat, this and that. In this city government, we are here to serve everybody, no matter what your race or your religion or your gender. We're here for all people. So I'm hoping and praying as we move forward here within this group of people that we have a renewed sense of respect and caring for one another, because we're all humans. We're all here, right, Mr. Selberg? We're all here to serve the people, and let's do it with integrity, honesty, and caring for one another.
Any other open discussion? I have one item before we move on to our first report. There's a new program that was started within the city. I'm just going to read it so I don't get it mixed up here. It's called Onward, Transforming City Leadership. The program overview, the purpose of the Onward is to engage city employees of varied experience, educational backgrounds for a transformational leadership learning experience focused on creating a culture of innovation, problem solving, and strategic thinking. The Onward program is a collaborative effort with the City of Sioux Falls and the University of South Dakota Beacom School of Business. How it works: 15 city employees will be chosen by an application to partake in 7 monthly learning sessions led by USD faculty members. The program runs from February through July. There's more information online as well. I wanted to congratulate Jim David, our very own, who was nominated by a city director. It is kept anonymous. He was selected, an application was sent through. Marshall and I did see that and did give him the permission to, of course, go ahead and participate in this program. And so for that, I want to share that with this council, that I'm extremely proud and excited for him to have this opportunity and to be also recognized by other city directors as being an asset and a benefit to this council and the city of Sioux Falls is very important. And so when you see Jim, give him a little pat on the back and thank him for his service to us, as well as our other staff that we have, Tom Greco and David Bixler, who also do a lot for us as well. Just wanted to share that information with you because as humble as Jim is, he probably wouldn't tell you. So we'll move on to the next item, which is presentations, 2018 Report on Refugee Resettlement and Center for New Americans. Welcome. Please introduce yourself, and the microphone is yours.
Good afternoon, Council. My name's Tim Juergens. I'm the Director, as well as the State Refugee Coordinator for Refugee Resettlement here in South Dakota, as well as Sioux Falls. I'm hopeful that I can answer your questions this afternoon, and we have a bit of a presentation here that gives you basically the foundation as the program currently sits and how we operate. So first of all, just a quick slide. The Center for New Americans is one of 11 programs currently that LSS of South Dakota operates on a statewide basis. And while I won't go into any one of those specific programs, I will be addressing Center for New Americans this afternoon. So, because it's such a delicate topic and because there's so much confusion with what's going on at the southern border, what I want to simply share real quickly is all refugees are immigrants, but not all immigrants are refugees. And what do I simply mean by that? And that's just basically refugees don't have a choice to flee their country. They're fleeing their country due to persecution, race, religion, nationality, or membership in a particular social group. Whereas you have the immigrants that are hitting the border in the south, they're choosing to flee. And so that there's a big difference there, and there's much confusion there. Refugees, upon arrival into the United States, they have legal status in the U.S., and they are eligible to work upon arrival. Very important. Many of our community members, one of the myths is that refugees arrive and they rely on the local welfare system to support them. That's very untrue, and we'll show that later here in a second. Secondary migrants is another topic or another term that I think is important. Refugees have status for 5 years once they arrive into the U.S. And refugees, once they hit their port of entry into the U.S., can turn or move on to any other state that they may choose. So for example, if a refugee would hit the state of Minnesota, they could choose to move the next day, a week later, or 2 weeks later. And that is a common trend that we have. We have no control over secondary migration. It's basically with the Refugee Act of 1980. And we cannot enforce them or ask them to come into Lutheran Social Services for services. While they may be eligible, it's simply up to them whether they choose to reach out to us to help them with one of the services that we provide. Typically on an annual basis, we would work with anywhere between 220 to 250 secondary migrants that would secondarily choose to call Sioux Falls home. Why they may come to Sioux Falls are for the same reasons that we exist here and why we choose to come here. And that is typically educational opportunities, school, being with good neighbors, being with family. Becoming a refugee. Typically, they're going to be in camps upwards of 10 to 40 years, okay? And they typically will start that process with registration with the UNHCR, United High Commission for Refugees. We are one, or the U.S. is one of 30 countries typically or currently right now that accepts refugees ongoing. Less than 1% of that population currently gets resettled or deemed a refugee. Vetting, it's been a popular topic for many, many years. Currently, it takes anywhere between 18 to 24 months to vet an individual. Their interviews conducted include biometrics, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of State databases. It also includes health screenings prior to their departure. And as I mentioned a second ago, while at 18 to 24 months, on the average, if you talk to our clients that arrive into the Sioux Falls area, what you're going to find is they've been in that camp for upwards of 40 years prior to being released to travel. The screening process is continually enhanced, and it's changed on an annual basis. How does it start nationally? The presidential determination is decided typically early or late in the federal fiscal year. So generally around August, September, we will be getting word on what the national arrival trends will be, as long as the ethnic groups that will be allowed to be resettled. That is decided by the President of the United States. The U.S. refugee program is currently made up of 9 national VOLAGs, of which South Dakota is part of one, Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service. So currently, oftentimes you hear in the media or hear through the community is that Lutheran Social Services brings refugees in. Actually, Lutheran Social Services contracts with Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service, who contracts with the Department of State to bring in refugees nationally and or locally. The refugee program is an early self-sufficiency program, okay? Clients have up to basically 8 months to seek and find employment and become self-sufficient. As part of that agreement, each client signs a cooperative agreement with our program, and it basically mandates that they accept their first suitable form of employment. It basically only gives them allowances not to cross a picket line or not to work beneath or lower than minimum wage. That's the current requirement. If they were not to follow those terms, then they could be sanctioned and taken away or taken off of cash assistance. ESL, they're required to attend 24 hours of ESL per month to be eligible for the program. Roughly close to 100% of cases that come in are family reunification. So there's 2 types of cases. One would be family or blood relative, for instance, or it could be deemed a free case. A free case just simply means that they have no tie to Sioux Falls. In the last year, 100% of the cases that arrived to Sioux Falls and the surrounding area were all joining blood relatives, thus deemed a family unification case. During the initial resettlement period, that's where Lutheran Social Services of South Dakota comes in. The first 90 days, we call that the resettlement and placement period, or RMP. So essentially, as clients come in or arrive, we pick them right up at the airport. We work with each family member to complete a family self-sufficiency plan. We locate housing for them, provide donations either through their RMP fund or through in-kind items. We get them immunized and get their health screenings completed here at Falls Community Health. There's currently an MOU on board. We give them a new arrival orientation, which basically is 30 hours of new arrival orientation, or 3 hours, 10 days, that we work with local stakeholders to work with the families to try to get them integrated and assimilated to the local area. Enroll children in school, provide employment opportunities and training at that time, and also get them enrolled in ESL classes or English as second language classes. As I mentioned previously, they're eligible for up to a maximum of 8 months cash assistance. Currently, we'll show some employment statistics here in a few slides later, but essentially within 4 to 6 months, roughly about 90% or more are currently self-sufficient and employed at that particular time. The one difference in Sioux Falls, or I should say the state of South Dakota, all single-parent families have to go through the Department of Labor or Department of Social Services to work with the South Dakota TANF program if they happen to fall into a single-parent family, and that's just basically state law. Additionally, clients are eligible from date of arrival up to a maximum of 5 years. So while our service is very intensive with clients, I would say for the first 1.5 to 2 years approximately, clients are eligible to come back for service, whether it be ESL, case management, or employment type services. If they're beyond that point of the 5-year eligibility time frame, we certainly don't turn them away. We work with local stakeholders and to try to get their needs met. So how does it work locally as far as resettlement? How does Sioux Falls or the state of South Dakota, more importantly, decide how many refugees we take? So essentially, the Department of State will work with us to determine what that number is, what that local abstract number is. So we work with the Refugee Advisory Committee, which currently consists of 10 stakeholders here locally: Department of Social Services, Sioux Falls Police Department, City Human Rights, DSS, trying to think who I'm forgetting here. But we work very closely. We don't make that particular decision unilaterally. That's a decision that we work with them prior to the submission of the abstract, before we make that decision. So that's also, you'll hear nationally of what they call a quarterly consultation process. And we meet monthly, whereas the Department of State requires you to meet quarterly. So that's how those particular meetings occur. They happen to occur the second Monday of each month down at Lutheran Social Services Center for New Americans. At that time, we'll also discuss trends, numbers, ethnic groups, challenges, successes that we can all work with one another to make a successful program. These are numbers, both national and local. So if you look at the United States, a year ago we were at 22,491 from a national perspective. Sioux Falls, or statewide I should say, was 209. So you can see, in looking back from 2013 forward, numbers have decreased. There's no doubt about that. This year we're looking for 197 statewide. We'll see what that number looks like. As of right now, from a national perspective, we're only supposed to expect anywhere between 19 to 20,000 at a national level, which we are projecting in the crystal ball here locally would be 125, is what we're anticipating. Why is South Dakota different? The state of South Dakota opted out of resettlement or control of resettlement back in roughly 2000. At that particular time, they turned resettlement over to Lutheran Social Services of South Dakota. And what that's done for the program, I think, is created some advantages. For instance, we are now part, or what we're called, or classified as a Wilson Fish program. It's a privatized model that 13 other states utilize currently for resettlement. What that allows us to do is customize our programming. If you would go a state to the east, go to Minnesota as an example, there's multiple voluntary resettlement agencies that work there, sometimes as many as 3 to 5, depending on funding. And what happens there is they have to then, the state subcontracts dollars out, whether it be for ESL services, employment services, et cetera. What it allows us to do in South Dakota is keep that funding local, and we can customize what we would classify or call a one-stop shop for both stakeholders that work with refugees in the community, as well as clients themselves. So for instance, at our local program, they'll come to LSFs of South Dakota for their language training, for their employment training, any case management, any housing, any medical type of case management. They can come to a one-stop shop as well as the community stakeholders, whether it be Falls Community Health, Sioux Falls School District, Department of Labor. There's no need to chase clients around, so to speak, and it creates a much more effective and efficient process for everybody involved. Currently, we have 2 other offices aside from Sioux Falls. We have one office that we still utilize in Huron, South Dakota. Roughly back in 2008 or 2009, Dakota Provisions, if you're familiar with the turkey plant there, they actually started to recruit and target Burmese Karen. So back in 2008 or 9, significant numbers of Burmese Karen started ending up or traveling to Huron, South Dakota. Once that trend started, because the resettlement program is a family unification program, other cases started to arrive directly there in Huron. I would estimate right now there's roughly out of a population, I think when you drive in there, I think the population is right around 13,000. I would estimate that there's probably 5,000 to 6,000 Burmese Karen that now call Huron home. Aberdeen, similar issues because of the economic development opportunities there. Molded fiberglass, Damkota beef. There's many immigrants and refugees calling Aberdeen home now. So we are also there to attempt to support that integration as well, and to also work with local stakeholders. So these are just some outcomes. So last year, 80% of new refugees were self-sufficient within 8 months. So what about the extra 20% or the additional 20% that are not self-sufficient? Those would either be part of disability or disability through SSI and or SS or social or the retirement SSA is what they would be eligible for upon arrival. Average starting wage was $12.20 per hour. 94% of those individuals tracked or had access to benefits. That's tracked at 90 days. And 97% were employed or still employed at 90 days. That number's low. If we track that out through 6 months to a year, I would estimate or project to you that number would not go down. It would likely stay very consistent. One of the challenges we have with refugee resettlement is once individuals get their first opportunity, they don't leave. That's one of the challenges that we have. We like to open up those entry-level opportunities, so to speak, for new arrivals. And we simply, there's a loyalty factor there that they have for their local employers. And that's one of the healthy challenges that we find or face at all times. And that concludes that part of the presentation. Questions?
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Council, questions for Tim and or Betty? Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Councilor. Tim, thank you for being here today, and thanks for bringing Betty with you too. I was so impressed back in December when we had a chance to sit in your office and really have a nice discussion about what you're doing. I think so often you can agree with the work you're doing or disagree, because there are people who do that disagree
Certainly.
with what you're doing, but we need to start with facts. And I think that you're doing a great job of telling the community of what you are doing, because I do hear that quite often, that, they come here, they suck up our benefits, they take our jobs, they, all the negative things that people talk about with refugees. And it's good to hear the truth. It's good to hear that part of the story. So, one of the things that really stood out to me is that how long someone spends in a refugee camp before they're allowed to come and resettle in the United States. And that 10 to 40 years just blows my mind that someone would have to go through that before they had an opportunity. But I guess, can you expand a little bit on the numbers and the drop that you're seeing in the numbers of refugees and immigrants that are resettling through your program in South Dakota, and how that affects our workforce? Because go ahead.
No problem. It's a question we encounter frequently. It's certainly each new administration, whether Republican or Democrat, it's certainly, depending on what your belief is, it creates impact. So the administration will determine that number each year. And I think there is great belief that the program a few years ago, 2 years ago to be specific, they looked at trying to enhance and change vetting requirements, which we certainly support. We want the program and trust the program to be safe. And so I think we're at a time of reorganization with the program, and it certainly has, like it's impacted the nation or the numbers nationally, it's also impacted our local numbers. We get calls very frequently. We work with over 50 employers, and really wondering what's going on and how we can try to continue to assist them with, with employment placement and the possibility of employees. Part of our program, or most of it, hypothetically, or not hypothetically, but straightforward, is it's self-sufficiency. So we spend a great deal of money and resources on employment-specific training. And those classes last typically 3 weeks of each month, and we will work with local employers to develop and create specific workplace skills that can be transferable to clients when they come in and give them an advantage to take those opportunities. And there's not one field currently that we work with, occupational field, that does not take advantage of those types of classes. So it's very important, and we're feeling the crunch from employers wondering where their workforce is going to come from. No doubt about that.
That's good.
Councilor Neitzer.
Yeah, Tim, I'm really glad you came too. I went in December as well, and I was so impressed by the presentation, and it actually blew apart some preconceived notions that maybe even I had. So to learn about, because when you think about when we talk about the word immigration, and obviously with government shutdowns and what's been going on, I think the biggest thing is a lot of times we just kind of conflate the term immigration, and there's a lot of different types of immigration, and there's people coming in on visas for education or for jobs, and then you have refugee resettlement, and then you have illegal immigration crossing the border, you have legal immigration, and so, and I've heard that many times from constituents, even my first couple of years. There's a lot of people that, I'll be completely honest, they hear something like that and they have this assumption that, it's a gateway for terrorists to come in or whatever else. And so how much do you deal with that? And how much is that a challenge for you when talking to policymakers?
Well, it's certainly, we're very proactive with it. We love opportunities like this to try to come out and share the word and share the message and to really dispel the myths. We get concerns, whether it be through email or phone. The one thing that we don't do is, not return that call, not return that message. We go out to groups, we visit with them, we make similar presentations such as this. And the one thing that City Council can actually do for us, in return, is give us that opportunity. I do not mind at all the message that you may pass along to your constituents that allow us the opportunity to go out and conduct similar presentations or just have some Q&A to explain the facts of the program. And certainly, there's parts of this program, I'll be very honest with you, that I wish would change. From a programmatic perspective. We're very open to that, but it's something that we try to be very transparent about. It's not a program that Lutheran Social Services just decides what's going to happen in every situation. We try to work very closely with local stakeholders and or policy holders at the national level as well.
Go ahead.
And if I could maybe follow up, do you think if, in whatever it is, forgetting whether or not there should be a wall or whatever else, but do you think if at the federal level, if they came to some sort of agreement or deal or came up with something where they were able to get, I guess, illegal immigration a little bit more under control, that they would start upping your numbers? Are your numbers suffering because of
that's
illegal
above
immigration?
My pay grade.
Or okay,
it's above my pay grade. No, but what we would support is no matter what that plan is, something needs to be put in place. And I think all of us in this room probably or likely have a difference of opinion. However, we support whatever legalized method they're going to use and to try to move forward with that. And yes, do I think it's interrelated? Likely, just based on experiences, certainly. It's all connected in one way, shape, or form.
Okay, thank you for being here and thanks for the work.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Brecky.
Just a couple questions, and I want to, say at the get-go, it's going to kind of sound like I'm putting you on the spot, but I want you to understand it's in a positive way. I want to give you the opportunity to answer because one of my interests is, as a city, I think that there's more leadership we can show in how we integrate our diverse population into the city. And I think there is maybe a place for more programming and more involvement at a city government level. So I'm just going to kind of ask you just an open-ended question. Where do you see shortcomings, again, in what we're doing as a city as to how we help people, get into the community? And if you had a wish list, because we're getting into budget time, what kind of additional programming would you think would be beneficial to the work that you guys are doing over at LSS?
First thing I would share with you is public transportation. There's certainly limitations right now for all of our clients. To give you an estimate, it probably takes our clients about a year and a half to, once they hit U.S. soil, to get that first driver's license. So our clients that first year are relying on public transportation to get to and from their employment. And that's very challenging. I mean, if we would have put any one of ourselves in that situation and tried to become self-sufficient, having to rely on a bus or wait for a bus, or realize that many times that bus doesn't run far enough outside of Sioux Falls or to the edge of Sioux Falls to make that opportunity work, that's certainly a challenge. Housing's becoming less affordable. There's no doubt about that. So clients, when they initially hit U.S. soil, there's two types of assistance that they're eligible for. So from an RMP, resettlement and placement perspective, each client's eligible for $1,175 to get them set up into their first apartment. If you do the math on that, that's per person, that's very challenging for deposit and or rent. Aside from that $1,175, they're also eligible for a welfare stipend for that first 8 months, as I mentioned earlier. As soon as they get employment, that full-time opportunity, that amount likely is either terminated or decreased. But rent, as an example, just to kind of give you that financial equation, between $700 to $800 is very difficult initially for cases of 1, 2, 3, as an example. It makes it more challenging for us to get them integrated initially. So those would be the two big ones.
Just,
yes.
I got a couple questions,
Sure.
based, and this is mine. I would throw onto the list. I'm very concerned, not concerned, but I want to be proactive in the area of teaching English.
Sure.
And I've been talking with several individuals about trying to develop, some sort of a task force to try to address that issue. And when I say teaching English, I want to achieve a goal to fluent English.
Sure.
And I know, at the initial, that initially you need to, you guys teach workplace English, pursuant to
teach
contract.
conversational as well.
Conversational.
Yes, yes.
And I saw one of your slides talked about English training up to 5 years. Tell me what that entails, and is there opportunities, again, for the city to become more active in, providing opportunities for our immigrants and other diverse population to push towards fluent English?
Okay, sorry to interrupt you, I apologize. No. So clients are assessed upon arrival of what their literacy and or oral ability is, and that's done via the BEST test. And so we have on-site classrooms that can assess and work with students or adults that have a equivalent of a kindergarten through 4th grade ESL or literacy level. So those classes are offered 4 days a week from essentially 9 till about 4 in the afternoon, as well as Tuesday and Thursday evenings. So at any given point, we will have individuals that are on site taking ESL or literacy classes, anywhere between 100 to 120 people an hour through those 4 different levels of class. So once they would exceed those, that ceiling, so to speak, 5th grade and above, we then work on referring clients out. It could be Southeast Tech, it could be the University of Sioux Falls, that type of thing. But I don't see a shortfall initially in that grade level 1 through 4. It's really that pre-GED stage of, I would say, 5th grade through 9th grade, where there's a bit more of a challenge as far as, is it free, is there fees assessed with it, that type of thing, if that makes sense.
Actually, that's exactly what I'm finding, and that's kind of the hole I'm looking at, the gap, if you will, to see if we can't do something more to fill in that opportunity to get them to those additional levels so that, because I think it goes hand in glove with the employment opportunities that are available when you have better English. So-
Right, and our clients, make no mistake about it, if they could do it, if they could, once they hit U.S. soil or Sioux Falls, they would love to sit in English class and learn English. Unfortunately, it's not a reality. And what we found is that the majority of our clients, actually through workplace English, that conversational English type of format, they actually exceed or progress quicker than what they would likely progress in a ESL or oral class, or a literacy or ESL classroom, is what our findings or experiences have been.
Thank you.
You bet.
Counselor Staley.
Yes, Tim, really glad you came in. And I had a personal experience living next to a house of about 13 people from Liberia.
Sure.
7 years ago. And I agree with what Counselor Brecky said. The challenge that I found with these people, first of all, they're little children. And we had kids who, I wasn't sure if they were grandkids or daughters or, they were kind of all together there. And too many people in a house. But I took the children under my wing. I got them swimming passes. I read to them. I helped them. And what I saw with that community is that they tended to stay within themselves. And so I got a guy he worked through your organization, and he came into my backyard with these people, and he talked with them about how they need to be grabbing on to anything in their pathway to help them become accustomed to our ways, because otherwise it's going to be too easy to go down the path of destruction and end up maybe in the penitentiary if you're not getting all the strength that you can garner from this. So I understand the challenges. A few questions. On your last slide there, you said that 97% of them had kept their jobs for 90 days. I'm wondering how many people have kept their jobs for a year? Well,
We don't currently track that, and the reason we don't is because we go off the federal guidelines. But I would estimate that is very close to what it is.
Yeah, because
quite frankly, right.
And I will tell you that I've had people like Counselor Neisser said that are under the misconception, I guess, that Lutheran Social Services brings them in, works with them for 6 weeks, and then abandons them to the system. Okay, and that doesn't leave a good taste in the general public's mouth. When they come over, a person comes in with a blood connection, a relative, how long can they stay in our country? Is that like just an open-ended?
Well, unless they would commit a crime. I mean, the goal for us would be they'd get their legal permanent resident status at 1 year. That's when they're eligible. And then they would be able to or eligible to apply for citizenship at year 5. So our programming, we attach or tie them right away to our immigration legal team, and we try to proactively work with them on obtaining those statuses when they're eligible.
But so after a year, if they got that
Green card.
The green card, then they have to renew that every year, though, right?
No, just for the first year.
I thought people would have to get their green cards renewed. I've heard that in the past. That
Generally, they would get their citizenship likely before their second renewal of the green card.
But if they don't, you do. I am right.
You could renew it.
You have to, because some people, for some reason, just keep getting green cards.
Right.
Right. Maybe they.
But that would not be our recommendation. And depending on, if someone were to fall into trouble or make a bad decision, that certainly could impact them as well, or their status, where it could either they would not be eligible to continue, or they would be deported.
So let's say someone comes over and then they drop off the radar. Does that happen?
Well, they can out-migrate. I mentioned earlier where migration is legal. So they could come in and leave Sioux Falls immediately if they wanted to.
And so then your ability to
Our ability to work with them would not exist.
What percentage of people do that?
Very few out-migrate. We try to track that to the best of our ability as well. We have roughly 250 per year on average numbers that migrate in and come to us for service. Sioux Falls is a very popular location for some of the same reasons I've already talked about.
And then and then you may not have to tell me the answer to this.
Sure.
But how much do you get per person?
We get $1,000. We get reimbursed up to $1,000 and that's reimbursement for case management, travel, mileage, occupancy, fees such as that.
And then so $1,000 is the maximum, and then it's sounding like you're working with them, you're going to continue to help them for an unlimited amount of time.
We do. I mean, the maximum that we're allowed to based on federal guidelines and funding is 5 years. So if an individual, they could come to ESL for 5 years straight every day if they had that opportunity, and we would support that and we encourage them to do so. If they would come in after 5 years, occasionally I'll get a call from DSS maybe, or another stakeholder that might say, hey, Tim, we're working with an individual that's struggling. He or she's outside their 5th year. And we will work with local stakeholders to make that work and or use fundraising dollars that we have to try to assist the family. Our goal, wholeheartedly, I'll make this very clear, my goal for our clientele is not to live up public welfare. We want and expect our families to be self-sufficient. They encounter challenges just as you and I do and our families do, but our goal is for them to be self-sufficient. I'll be very straightforward with that. We want them to work and do the same things that all of us are doing to succeed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one brief question.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about the schooling and how you integrate, maybe if they come with their family, integrate them into schooling, and how that works, or if that's not a part of your piece? I know there's a warm handoff.
Sure. We have a great working relationship with the Sioux Falls School District. So as school age or K-12 children come in, we work with Jane Addams immediately upon arrival. Kids will get all their immunizations up to date, and Jane Addams, the Family Immersion Center, will go ahead and work with each individual family, assess his or her skill set, where they're at, and then make a decision as to where that child will be placed. So that's an ongoing relationship. And works very well thus far.
Thank you. And my kids go to All City at Jane Addams, and so there's essentially 2 wings of school there where you have the parent involvement and then you have the EIC wing. And the school does a phenomenal job of integrating. The kids in the EIC side learn the culture and exchange that back and forth with the parent involvement side, to where they're learning so much about their culture, what their house looks like, how to take swim lessons, and just reading together. How do you play Candyland? Just simple things like that. And many of those tools go back to the households and back to the families. It's really fun to meet some of those families that come in because they are excited to work. They're excited to get their kids shots, which some people think, oh, they're coming from other countries, it's not important. Though this is the first time they've had access to that. And so it's a big deal. And we've even had families that have seen the benefit of the school, that they have put them into the parent volunteering aspect, which has been really fun to see too. And so I appreciate your relationship with the school. I'm not as involved with that because I kind of stick on the parent involvement side, but I see the partnership and the relationship, and it's really impactful in our community, and teaching the parents English through their children as well.
Yeah, and I would certainly be remiss not to mention the stakeholders. I mean, the Sioux Falls School District, Sioux Falls Police Department, DSS, Minnehaha County Human Services, each of those stakeholders work with us on a daily basis. And so the efforts that we make are certainly not just LSS of South Dakota. It's really the city of Sioux Falls. That's the attraction to these clients. So it really, the good work that happens, a shout out to them as well. So.
Thank you. Councilor Selberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. Can you tell me again the numbers? I was curious because I kind of remembered about this as well. Huron, you were talking about the refugees that went up there in big numbers for the business.
Quarter provisions.
Right, and then once that business left town or closed.
Well, they're still in business.
They are.
The Quarter Provisions is.
Okay.
Correct.
But how many numbers were going up to Huron at that time for that business, and then you were?
So I believe that, these are all estimates. So if you go back roughly 2009, 10, 11, we were as high as probably 250 to 300 individuals that would go directly to Huron, South Dakota.
What was the 13,000? I was
13.
wrote down.
Oh, I was talking about the city population. So I was using an example. When you drive into Huron, if you look at the population sign,
Right.
I believe it's like a bit over 12,000 people. So the comment I was making was that half of that I would estimate is Burmese Karen.
Okay, that's the part.
That's what I was making a comment to. No, no problem, no worries.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Thank you again for being here. I appreciate you laying out the facts and getting the information out there. Any opportunity we can help get those opportunities in front of you is important too, because I think there's a lot of misinformation surrounding this item. We thank you again, and we will be in touch.
Thank you.
All right, we will move to our next item, 2018 I-Code adoption. Welcome, Butch Warrington.
Good afternoon. Butch Warrington, Chief Building Official for the City of Sioux Falls. Today I'm going to just bring you a little information, what you're going to see in approximately a month. We're going to start adopting the 2018 I-Codes. That would be the International Building Code, International Residential Code, Fuel Gas Code, Mechanical Code, Property Maintenance, and Fire Code. So I'm just going to give you a quick presentation of what we're all doing today. I'd like to introduce to you a few extra people that I have here that we brought in for support. First one is Terry Kelly. Terry Kelly is the chairman of the Building Board of Appeals, and we have taken all the adoption to them so they see what's going on. So we're not trying to hide anything or throw anything at them. And Terry is the chairman of our Building Board of Appeals. He's back there. The other one is Brad Mayer. Brad is the chair of the Building Codes Committee for the Home Builders Association. He's also the vice chair for the HBA. I've met with them a couple of different times to make sure everything is kosher. If we had some questions, we'll work them out and go that route. So everything was real good. I have taken these also to the South Dakota Multi-Housing, and I see Denise Hanslick's here. So I don't know if she's supporting me or not, but I hope so. I also brought along the building inspection manager, Neil King, and the mechanical inspection manager, Gary Clarenby, because they've been very instrumental in helping get this going. And Matt Tobias here is, as the property maintenance code will be adopted also. Just a couple of key points. I don't have a slide on this one, but it is something I want to make you aware of. In 2015, there was a code section that we adopted, and that was on storm shelters. And it required for every educational occupancy to build a storm shelter that could withhold all the occupants in that building. So that would be a school. We've got 2 schools under construction right now, the Sioux Falls Lutheran School, and there's also an addition out at the T Elementary School, the Frontier. They are putting in storm shelters designed for 250 mile an hour. As we went through the code adoption period this time, 250 mile an hour code wind speed sounded like a little too much. So my intent is to bring that back down to 200 mile an hour. I've talked to Jeff Kreider with the school district. I've talked to some architects around here. And the last 2 elementary schools that were constructed by the Sioux Falls School District, they put in storm shelters designed to 200 miles an hour. They did that on their own. So that's why one of the reasons I want to bring it back down. We are on the edge. we're probably within 50 miles of not being required to do this at all. It just cuts into the southeast portion of South Dakota. Otherwise, if we were over in Mitchell, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. But I think going from 250 to 200 is a good compromise. I did a little research. The state of Iowa took it out. They don't have to put in a storm shelter at all. I talked to Steve Jastrom with Architecture Incorporated, and over in Wisconsin, they're debating this right now, and it's a big controversial item. In fact, he's thinking maybe if we go down to that 200, he is going to take it over to them to tell them what we did. So this could have impact more than just Sioux Falls. In addition, there's a lot of different jurisdictions that will follow us. I have a lot of jurisdictions that tell me, as soon as you get your codes adopted, would you send me a copy? So we are kind of the leader in that. One of the other big things, in the last code cycles, we have shrunk, or we didn't accept the advantages of a sprinkler system in a big building, where you could shrink the size of the stairways and exiting down. I'm going to take that out. This came into play at Village on the River, where they designed it, and then I told them a little thing that, well, you designed it to 0.3 inches per person, and their mouth dropped open. They didn't realize we had that local amendment. So we ended up taking it to the Board of Appeals, of which Terry was the chair on, and during this, I found out I was on an island by myself. I was the only one around that was doing this, and I talked to many different jurisdictions in different states. So I'm going to take that out and allow that exception in. That's a biggie. So now they can go down to 2. And if you're curious what the Board of Appeals ended up doing, the architects came in with a alternative that we could accept. So instead of making them create a larger stairway, instead of 2-hour fire resistive walls, which is what's normal, they went to 3-hour to give people that extra time to get out. The other big one that we got is sprinklers in apartments. This is a big one, and we've talked about this before, other councils have, and what's happened is we found out, talking to the state of South Dakota, that their intent was every building that houses an apartment will be sprinkled. Well, that's over 6 units and more. We had been allowing the construction to put a fire barrier wall every 5 units in order to allow them to keep building and sprinkle. They told us that was not their intent. So we're going to change our interpretation. And this is where I have met with Denise. I've met with builders to get them on board. They realize this is coming. They really haven't objected. So that was kind of interesting. Go to the IRC, which is the International Residential Code. There are not a lot of changes to the residential code this time around. The one thing, I did talk to the home builders, and the last time they came, asked the council to not accept the fire protection from floors, and I'm gonna just go ahead and do that, keep it the same status quo this time. I did find out that there is some products out there that are coming where you can spray on to get that same protection. It's about $1 a square foot. So I'm hoping, and it's a new product, so I'm hoping maybe in 3 years we can readdress this issue, and hopefully that number will come down. But at this point in time, I wanted to leave it the same. Here's an item, minimum footing size for a deck, and I don't know if you can read it very well, but this is a new section in the code. And the smallest footing size was 14-inch round. Well, that's a little much for a 5x5 deck or a 10x10 deck. So we're just gonna delete that, and we're gonna use it the same way we've been doing it the last few years. We're gonna base that footing on the size of the pier, on the weight that's on that pier. And that's something the home builders were very happy that we were not doing. And this is kind of a neat little slide. This is something new to the code, and I think they really did a good job here. If you have a small, I like to call it a star room or an office up above, typically you had to have a regular set of stairs to them. Well, now they allowed you to put in a ship's ladder or an alternating tread. So you're steep, you don't take up so much room, and I think it's only for 200 square feet or less. I think this was a good provision put into the code. Are we gonna see it a lot? Probably not, but it gives you some options. And that's the end. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Questions by counselors? Counselor Brecky.
I know generally if there's opposition, it usually has to do with cost. Just, you know, a lot of these amendments over time add to the cost of building and add to the cost of construction. The items that and then sometimes, yeah, you negotiate and you modify things a little bit to be fair and still have the safety that you want and not compromise, but, but deal with the cost issue. Do you see any of these amendments that you're doing? How are they affecting the cost? And what is the,
Probably the biggest one that we're going to affect is by requiring those sprinkler systems in those apartments. However, talking with Dean Lanier, our fire chief over in fire prevention, we've got it down for those 6 to 16 units that we have. And this is where it really comes, because most of the time, anything over 16, they're putting the sprinkler system in anyway. It's going to be a bare bones system. We've talked to the water department. We're going to be able to run one water line in instead of two, but that water line will have to be capable of being used for potable water. So it gives them some options. Maybe it's cheaper to run two, maybe not. They'll give the option. With these units, up to 16 units, you do not have to have a fire alarm panel. So that cuts that system. It's going to be just a very bare bones system. We're trying to keep it as cost effective as we possibly can for this. So we can get what they want, but yet keep it affordable. We're talking about it, and we haven't come to a decision yet whether plumbers can actually do it or if they still have to be a sprinkler fitter. That's still up for debate. I know Dean's working on it. One of the other things that we're working on is one of the contractors asked if we could just put up a schedule that say if it's a 100 square foot room, you need one head versus 110, you might have to put up two. And Dean's working on that too, whether we can get something going, because we are trying to work with them and we're trying to keep this as affordable as we can.
Thank you. I'm glad that you're focused on that, because I know as the council, we just keep hearing over and over again that affordable housing is an issue, and it's like, how much safety can you afford? And those things, it only, adds $500 to put an ingress window in the basement of houses. I remember that one, way back when. And, but yeah, it's that level of safety and, trying to find that balance. So thank you.
Councilor Neitzer.
Yeah, I'm going to be curious to hear from any stakeholders if they have any concerns about the sprinkler issue. Are there offsets where, for example, they wouldn't have to put in, a certain hour wall that they can reduce, and there's going to be some offsetting costs?
They won't have to put those 2-hour walls in at all anymore, because that's going to be a provision that's out. So they will save some money at that point in time.
Okay. Once again, any stakeholders, I want to make sure I hear yay or nay on this and take the input. Yep. Thanks.
Any other questions? I have one, and maybe you said it and I was daydreaming a brief second. Are any of the, when we talk about the sprinklers, because that's kind of a hot area that is a large change, and it will add a significant amount when you do that, and essentially it's going to be passed on to the renter. I mean, as a landlord myself, when my taxes go up, my rents go up. It's just what it is. And so for this, if a person owns, are they grandfathered in, or if they're taking out a new building permit to make changes to a property, do they then have to retrofit and put it back in? Talk a little bit about that way.
That was one of the keys. The buildings that are constructed now were built under a current code to a code. We're not going to make anybody go in and retrofit anything with a sprinkler. The exception, of course, would be is if they tear down a whole bunch of walls and retrofit it, because the existing building code will allow you to do up to 50% reconfiguration of space. That happens, I don't know if I've ever seen that actually happen. Even if they do a remodel on an apartment building, typically they put the walls back up in the same spot. They're not reconfiguring the space. They're remodeling, but they're not reconfiguring. So that was one of the key things. We're not going to make them retrofit. Another example where they may have to is if they take a large house downtown and it was a single family dwelling, now they're going to make it into an apartment complex. My suggestion to them will be make it 5 units, not 6. So they don't have to put that sprinkler system in.
Right. Go ahead, Councilor Naitzer.
One other possible exception, what if there's a fire and it's damaged over, let's say, 50% or whatever your magic threshold is?
And there again, if they put the walls back up in the same location, they're going to be fine. But if they're going to reconfigure it and try to make, say, 3 units out of 1, that's when they're going to probably run into something and we'll have to look at it.
Okay, thanks.
However, Counselor, if they had sprinklers, they wouldn't have had a fire. So maybe that, just kidding.
Well, maybe.
Just kidding. Okay, I would be curious about, I want to dive in a little bit myself and look at some of those changes. It's usually those big items that we have a little heartache over, and certainly reach out to the industries to making sure that we're not making affordable housing unaffordable by adding in extra costs, as we've seen before. Are there any other, I know that you highlighted changes. Is there an easy way for us, if I want to look through this and I don't read code, how can I determine what the changes are? Even though these are the significant changes, there might be some that, one of us look at and go, whoa, this is significant, even though maybe it didn't qualify to others. Or maybe there's something we want to take out.
Sure. I do have copies of all the I-codes and what the changes are. Right now, they're over at Media Services getting done, and if you would like copies of them, I'll gladly get them to you.
And I don't know if we need 8 copies for everyone, but if there is a copy that wants to come into the building, and we can, I don't want 8 copies if 8 people aren't going to read through it, but maybe having a couple of shared copies that we can look at and staff can help us go through a little bit, just to make sure that we're aware of those changes. I just don't want to blindly vote on something, and not that I don't trust you, it's just a matter of doing my own homework.
You may want them on electronic copy.
That probably is a better idea.
They're quite thick, I'm going to tell you that right now.
And there's what, 8 of them?
Yeah.
7. Any other questions? Go ahead, Councilor Naitzer.
Will at least all of the changes in dirty copy be in an electronic format that?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
Okay, well, we'll just privately reach out to you.
Yep. If you want any of them, just contact Director Cooper and I'll just get them to you.
Okay.
That won't be a problem at all.
Sounds great. Thank you. And I'd encourage, if the public, if for some reason wants them as well, it's an open document that would be provided to them as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will move to public comment. We have 15 minutes set for public comment. Please note that public comment is for the agenda items, and you have 5 minutes to speak. If anyone is here to speak about anything on the agenda, please step forward, state your name. Great. Seeing none, we will adjourn this meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, come on up. Welcome, sir.
I was introduced earlier by Butch. I'm Brad Mayer. I'm representing the Home Builders Association here. Want to get up and say something since I made the trip down here. Appreciate all of this. want to just make a point. I serve also nationally on our National Home Builders Association and work with the committees that deal with building code on that level. I want to just let you know, which I don't know if you know this so much as not, with Ron Bell previously and with Butch now, we have a very unique working relationship. Our home builders here locally and building services. It is not like this very many other places. It's almost a us against them, contentious, we're going to do it this way, we're going to do it this way. Where we've had since I've been involved, I'm not a super old seasoned person, but I've been around a number of years. It's been a very good working relationship where things are, ideas are gone back and forth. Cost, affordability is a huge issue right now. You're seeing these home prices. And there's national statistics on every $1,000 that's added to a price of a new home eliminates this many people from affording that home. So I just want to thank the Building Services Department here on behalf of our organization and just say that in case you didn't quite know what the relationship really is, it's very unique and very positive in our eyes, and I think it's a mutual deal. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate you being here. Hi, Denise.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Denise Hanslick, Executive Director for South Dakota Multi-Housing Association. And I just want to express our support of the IRC and all of the building code proposed changes that they're going to be bringing forward. It is due to their willingness to negotiate with property owners that has lent our support in favor of. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. All right, seeing no other testimony, we will conclude this meeting and we will see you at 7 p.m. Thank you.